Hello and welcome to our Cloud Backup Best Practices technical training course. My name is Ron Delaney, the Training and Development Manager here at AvePoint. In this short course, we're going to focus on some best practices to help you get up and running and avoid any potential problems down the line in Cloud Backup. The first thing is making sure that you understand the chosen license model. By chosen license model, I'm referring to, as a customer, whichever way you have licensed Cloud Backup with AvePoint. Back in our Cloud Backup Foundation course, we talk about the different ways that Cloud Backup can be licensed. Each one has a particular cap, which, when exceeded, can trigger overages. Overages will trigger messages that you receive in the product, and also email messages that you will get from the system. In order to avoid those notifications, we need to avoid overages, and the only way to avoid going into overage territory is to understand your license, whether it happens to be unlimited organization or unlimited users. Having that knowledge in the back of your mind as your organization transforms, grows, and changes in size and scope over time will ensure that Cloud Backup and its continued functionality is always a consideration. Another thing that you have to keep in mind, of course, are the backup scopes. Not only the actual sources themselves, SharePoint, Exchange Online, Groups, Project Online, and so on, but also within each of those sources, which scopes are actually being backed up. Are you backing up all of your mailboxes across the enterprise, or are you only backing up select mailboxes? Are you backing up all of your SharePoint site collections, or only select SharePoint Online site collections? We know what's being backed up is determined by the dynamic object registration rules at the AOS tenant level. Remember though, the word dynamic in there means that these rules are running at least once a day. When the rules run, they may be pulling in new objects if they happen to match the rules. If you're only backing up the mailboxes for someone in the managers group and you add 3 managers, they now are being backed up the next day when the rule picks those up, and then the next backup job runs. If you are using metadata to target SharePoint Online site collections, and you create new site collections with appropriate metadata, once DOR picks those up, they will begin to be backed up as well. This is a good thing, but improper metadata can potentially lead to things being included in the backup that shouldn't be, and also things being excluded from the backup that shouldn't be. So understanding the backup scopes and what should be included will again help you avoid those problems down the line by making sure that as things get created, whatever metadata you're using for DOR to pick up on those objects is correct. Identifying the best number of backups per day, remember up to 4 at a maximum, will help ensure that backup jobs are not being skipped simply because of size. Typically this will not be an issue, but if it's a very, very large enterprise and there are a lot of changes that are being backed up with every incremental backup, it is possible that if you try to run 4 a day, just by sheer volume alone, the backup job may not complete. If we do find in testing that that's the case, then we want to maybe do 3 backups a day or possibly even 2 backups a day. This, of course, may not simply be on volume. This may also be based around simply your data protection preferences. If you only want 1 backup or 2 backups a day, we can identify that and we can set that directly in the tool. And remember, you can do that by scope. So backup SharePoint once a day, but backup mailboxes 4 times a day if you choose to. Where does the backup data go? We know that there are 2 options. AvePoint can provide storage as part of your license, and that way you don't have to worry about where the backup data is actually residing. The Cloud Backup tool will just place it there automatically, and it will retrieve it from there automatically. If you prefer to store your backup data on your own storage, you can of course do that as well. But one of the things that we recommend is that we know that from the beginning. We make that decision from the beginning. And the reason why I say that is because if you start off, for instance, using the AvePoint backup storage, and we create the initial full backup that gets created every time someone first comes online, well then that full wants to stay in that location. What I mean by that is that the full can be very, very large. If 6 months into using Cloud Backup, you decide that you then want to move it over to your own storage, well, moving that original full can be kind of a daunting task because again, it may be very, very large. You may decide then to just create a brand new full, but then what about the backup data that you've been saving for the last 6 months back in the original location? It's not going to be usable at that point. So we really want to try to identify where the backup data should go from the beginning, from the first point where you're using cloud backup, and then we leave it there. When I say consider how the restore controller restores, what I'm referring to there is the restore controller's ability to do granular restores, to find individual objects, individual documents in SharePoint, individual email messages in Exchange Online as an example, and then restore those back either in place or out of place. If you select a lot of individual items, those items will be restored one at a time. That includes all of their metadata as well as the actual object itself. When that happens, what Office 365 sees, potentially, is a lot of calls coming in from the cloud backup service. If you are doing that, and we have not properly configured the service account pool to spread out that workload, then the possibility of being throttled by Office 365 is very real. So when I'm saying consider how the restore controller restores, I'm not referring to actually making any changes on how the restore controller works in the interface, because that we can't do. What I'm referring to is thinking that through and understanding that having one service account at the AOS tenant level is probably not going to be great, not only for backup performance, but also for your restore performance. Using the service account pool is going to be much, much better. So that brings me to the leverage a service account pool. Once again, at the AOS tenant level, we have the service account, which has global admin rights into Office 365 and can be used to perform individual tasks as AvePoint Online Services connects to Office 365 and logs in. But things like backing up data makes a lot of calls to Office 365. Things like restoring many objects back into Office 365 makes a lot of calls. So the idea of the service account pool is to spread that workload out, and we have certain recommendations. As an example, at least 7 service accounts to be used in the pool for every 1,000 SharePoint Online site collections. You can read more about those recommendations in the Cloud Backup User Guide, but that's certainly something we want to do to help both the performance of the tool itself and to avoid Office 365 automatically throttling the connection, which lasts for a specific period of time, by the way. It's not just stop this job and then restart it and you're back to full speed. There's a time period where that throttling coming in from that service account connection will remain. So we want to try to avoid that, and we can avoid that with the service account pool. For tips on how to configure all of the things that I just talked about, remember we have our other videos in this series, so if you have not gone and viewed those, please do so. But you can also get walkthroughs for all of these configurations right out of the Cloud Backup User Guide, which can be found on avepoint.com, and hit the Resources dropdown and go into User Guides. Thank you for viewing our Cloud Backup Best Practices recording, and have a great day.